Are the Denver Broncos still missing one key piece to help make their team more complete? Should Sean Payton look to make another addition of a veteran presence before training camp 2025? And we got a change at 20th and Blake, but I'm not sure it was the one we were all hoping for. All things to come on today's rundown, but we will begin in the NFL, where one of our own here at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan has put it out there and made it known that he thinks the Denver Broncos still have one hole left to fill on their roster, which has been filled with a number of decent additions on both sides of the ball. And he even has a name in mind to fill it. That man is Will Peterson, Scrappy Will, as many call him around these walls. And he thinks that the Denver Broncos still have a missing piece at the wide receiver position, specifically the number 2 wide receiver opposite Courtland Sutton. Now, traditionally speaking, it's easier to point out a problem than it is to solve one. And Will Peterson takes care of both of these in the article that's out at DenverSports.com for your viewing and reading pleasure. He lists free agent wide receiver, former Charger, and more recently former Chicago Bears wide receiver, Keenan Allen. The 33-year-old veteran wide receiver has amassed over 11,000 yards in his receiving career and a significant number of receptions. I believe he's over the 4-digit mark in receptions in his 12 NFL seasons thus far. And I completely agree with Will Peterson. I do. In Chicago last season, it was a down year production-wise, a little bit for Keenan Allen in a bad and discombobulated, I should say, Chicago Bears offense with rookie Caleb Williams. But even then, Keenan Allen still put up productive numbers in 2024 that I think are befitting of an NFL number 2 wide receiver. 70 receptions, 744 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Was Keenan Allen brought in to be the number 2 wide receiver for the Bears? Probably not. But he is an aging veteran receiver that fits that mold and that profile. And Chicago was very adamant about adding weapons around their number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams during his rookie season. The question remains, who is going to be the number 2 wide receiver for the Denver Broncos? And the answer to that question, we just honestly don't know. It was Marvin Mims last year. Could it be Marvin Mims again? Sure. Should it be? Probably. Could it be Devon Vele, who in terms of 7th round rookie wide receivers produced at a high level, high enough that we hadn't seen in some time for someone in his exact drafting position in a rookie season? Is this the year that Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's former teammate at Oregon, somebody who possesses that flash in the pan, breakaway speed, take the top off a defense ability, but never showed it even remotely consistently enough in the regular season? Is this the year that he takes another step? We've been talking about number 2 wide receiver level production from the tight end position with Evan Ingram, who has finally been brought in to be Sean Payton's joker, the missing piece that's been coveted through the first 2 seasons of Payton's tenure here in Denver. All of those are maybes. None of them are definitelys, which is why ultimately I agree with Scrappy Will Peterson in his article, the premise behind it at DenverSports.com, that says the Broncos still have a need at the number 2 wide receiver position. They do. That is a hole if I had to pick one out. And the name that he has proposed to solve that problem and fill that hole in Keenan Allen, I absolutely wouldn't mind the Broncos, who have about $15 million in cap space to spend. And I don't think it'll take $15 million to get Keenan Allen here, even on a short-term basis. The Broncos, in my opinion, there's no reason for them not to do this. If they don't do it, is it a make or break? No. But there's no reason for them to go out of their way to avoid it. Because as I talked with Scrappy Will Peterson and Philip Lindsay on the drive yesterday afternoon, and I had Philip Lindsay sit across from me and say, hey, the Broncos Super Bowl window is cracking open. He was agreeing with Will Peterson, who initially said that. I may not be ready to say that the window for a Super Bowl for the Broncos is cracking open, but I'll tell you what, I can see the window. I maybe am drawing the shades, pulling up the blinds on that window. But I don't know that it's open yet. I'd like to see the Broncos have a better record against winning teams above 500 during an NFL season than they did this past year. I'd like to see a sophomore jump instead of a sophomore slump from Bo Nix in his second year in the NFL. I'd like to see the skill position players that the Broncos have gambled on, J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, Pat Bryant, continued development from Mims and Franklin. I'd like to see those gambles start to pay off. I'd like to see the health gambles they've made on defense with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw. I'd like to see these things come together more than just the 1 year, and the new pieces that they've made make the impact that they were brought in to make before I'm ready to say Super Bowl. But the conversation is brewing. And so even though I'm not ready maybe to say Super Bowl window is opening for the Broncos just quite yet, bringing in a guy like Keenan Allen at a minimum supports a team who is looking to continue an accelerated rebuild and turn their focus away from a rebuilding and toward a retooling with the focus on winning now. I think Keenan Allen, as Will Peterson asserted at DenverSports.com, fits that bill. Sign me up. In the world of baseball, we did get a change at 20th and Blake. And we talked earlier this week in a little bit more lengthy fashion about a sit-down that veteran Major League Baseball and Rockies reporter Patrick Saunders, somebody who has covered multiple sports beats in this town over the last handful of decades, had a sit-down with Charlie Monfort, former co-owner and co-founder of the Colorado Rockies in their current iteration, the older brother of Dick Monfort, and somebody, I'm sorry, the brother of Dick Monfort, and somebody who was at one point Dick Monfort's boss. He sat down, Patrick Saunders did, with Charlie Monfort, who is now coming back, at least in some fashion, into the fold over at Coors Field after taking some time away to handle and manage some substance abuse issues. And I said at the story then, I said it on the air with Philip Lindsay when the story broke, for all of the fun and justified sneering that we may put in the Colorado Rockies direction, the way that Charlie Monfort has been able to come back to a place where he feels like he can be a part of and a productive member of the organization that he was an integral part of before stepping away from the front office is a fantastic thing. Substance abuse is not a joke. It is something that has touched a lot of lives and a lot of families. Someone you know, I almost feel like almost everyone you know has been touched or afflicted by this in some way, and I'm no exception to it. So a fantastic side note to that story was the potential for Charlie Monfort to maybe, just maybe, be the one who has the power and the cachet and the gravitas to bend the ear of Dick Monfort and urge the changes that the likes of you and me and the fan base and everyone around our great baseball team, or I shouldn't say our beloved sometimes baseball team here in town, have been begging for. Changes to bring in real baseball people and baseball minds to make decisions and run things on the day-to-day and take that power away from Dick and away from the Bill Schmitz of the world and move on potentially from the Bud Blacks, even though I think Bud Black was a scapegoat in all of this and is not a halfway bad Major League Baseball manager. No one else, it seems like, is going to have the capability to do that except for Charlie. A fan boycott is not going to work, in my opinion. You're not going to be able to impact the pocketbook deeply enough to be able to do that because, damn it, the ballpark is awesome and it's fun. And you get 300 days of sunshine here in Colorado, and it's the longest professional sports season that we have around the year. And it's a foundational element and core memories for young parents to be able to take their kids or friends to be able to experience each other. And so you end up having to weigh this ugly thing, which I argued with Mike Evans on the morning show about today, of, putting yourself in a position where you feel like you have to deprive yourself for some kind of greater good that you don't even know is necessarily attainable. And ultimately, I feel like you and me, or the consumer, just ends up being the loser. But Charlie Monfort, potentially, in my opinion, is one of the few that could change some of that. And we did just today get news about changes at 20th and Blake. But I'm not sure the solution is the one that we would have all wanted. We got a release from the team today that said current president and COO Greg Fiesel, who's been with the team since 1995, will be stepping away from his duties, will be relieved of his duties at the end of this 2025 season. But his replacement has a name that I think we're all uncomfortably familiar with, and that is current Vice President of Corporate Partnerships, Walker Monfort, the son of Dick Monfort, will be assuming Greg Fiesel's duties. They will be working in tandem for the remainder of this season, and Walker Monfort will assume his new role of Executive Vice President of the Rockies beginning in 2026. We got change, but we don't probably like the solution. And I think that ultimately is the most Rockies, insular, head-banging, frustrating solution that could have come out of all this, because the more things change when it comes to 20th and Blake, the more they ultimately stay the same. What does it mean for the future trajectory of the franchise? I don't know, but I do know this. Whatever hope that I had earlier this week when I tried to spin a positive yarn about the Colorado Rockies and the potential for Dick's brother Charlie to bend the ear of his brother and maybe voice some of the frustrations like he did with Patrick Saunders and speak on behalf of the fan base and the baseball-loving population here in Colorado, which is vast. All of the hope that I was trying to spin and run with as a potential way out or a light flickering at the end of that tunnel, today's announcement that President and COO Greg Fiesel will end his decades-long tenure that started in 1995 with the team. It will end after this season. And the current VP of Corporate Partnerships, Walker Monfort, Dick Monfort's son, will assume those duties as Executive Vice President of the Rockies. Feels like the wind is pulled out of those sails just a little bit. The more things change, the more they ultimately stay the same. We are coming up on a big weekend. The NBA draft kicked off yesterday. The second round begins tonight. The Nuggets were quiet, as expected, on night one of the NBA draft, but there is always the potential for co-executive VPs. We got a lot of EVPs, executive vice presidents in Colorado sports now. We've got Walker Monfort, who's going to be the EVP of the Rockies. We have co-executive vice presidents Jonathan Wallace and Ben Tenzer, one over player personnel, one over basketball operations over there at Ball Arena for the Nuggets. And the latter of those executive vice presidents in Ben Tenzer and John Wallace have the opportunity maybe to buy their way into the second round and select another young player to further push the play the pups movement that Calvin Booth pushed in spite of Michael Malone, that Josh Kroenke and company ultimately agreed with when they decided to part ways with Michael Malone and only parted ways with Calvin Booth after he rejected their contract extension. The margins of the roster around that top five are going to be the only thing that can separate this upcoming 2025 team from their 2024 predecessor, and they will ultimately decide whether or not the ceiling for the Denver Nuggets still exists firmly around that second round of the NBA playoffs. We will see what develops between now and then. We are less than a month away from Broncos training camp. All 800 tickets that were allotted to each of the 13 practices available to fans in my viewing have been bought up and are now, you got to ask, you got to know somebody, you got to have a friend, you got to wait for a buyback, etc. We will see how the construction continues of that new facility and what is in store for that team in 2025. In the meantime, we will catch you tomorrow with a very special milestone episode of The Rundown. It'll be there at noon. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in